We are Rogue Media Sports.
So, Matt, the Doomsday Podcast would like to welcome, I want to call him a frequent guest, but I don't know that that's accurate. But he's appeared before. And the fact that he's willing to appear a second time, I take a great deal of gratitude in that. He's the only quarterback in Cowboys history to have won multiple Super Bowls and never lost a single one. Did you know that?
Wow.
I saw a thing going around on Twitter about who would you want if you were picking a Cowboys quarterback and you had to win one game, who would you want? I think a lot of people might say Roger Staubach, but I think it's pretty hard to argue against Troy Aikman, who joins us now after a season of upheaval with the Dallas Cowboys, a coaching change. We've had an entire draft now. Jason Garrett, his good friend, is now the offensive coordinator with the New York Giants. So, Troy, welcome to the show. I'm sure you've already done a Peloton class. I know you've told me that during the quarantine, when most people have gained a tremendous amount of weight, I'm no present company excluded, except for Frito, that you are in the best shape of your life somehow. How have you managed that during this quarantine?
Well, I don't know that I'd go quite that far. You know, years ago, Babe Loffenberg said to me, he says, you know, when you hear these players that say they're in the best shape of their lives, he says, you know, they're usually at the twilight of their career. You know, they're about done. You don't ever hear an incoming rookie say they're in the best shape of their life. It's always a guy who's
on his way out
on the other side, you know. And so I'm not quite ready. You know, I feel like I'm being put out to pasture if I say I'm in the best shape of my life. But having said that, I did go extreme during this quarantine. And, you know, what else was there to do? So I was working out a lot, feel good. And but not nearly as good as I feel right now, getting a chance to be a two-timer on this podcast. So I'm excited about being on with you guys. Appreciate you having me.
Just imagine when the number of appearances on the Doomsday Podcast equals the number of Super Bowl rings on your resume. What a proud man you will be.
I'm going to put that on my tombstone. Speaking of being in...
I thought you weren't on your way out. Now you're talking about tombstones. This is a non sequitur there. All right, let's get down to some football. We haven't had any, so I guess we're in a speculative mode. But one of the interesting things, Troy, is that every team in the NFC East except for Philadelphia has made a head coaching change. How much of an advantage do you see that being for Doug Peterson and the Eagles, presuming we have a season?
Well, I do think that when you look at the offseason and how all of this is going to impact the various teams, depending on just how much work any of these teams get prior to the start of the season, I guess even that in and of itself, as far as when does the season start, is somewhat up for debate. Although from where I sit, I believe that we'll play a full season.
What are your thoughts about the NFL potentially playing games, but maybe without fans or in stadiums that aren't at anywhere close to full capacity? How do you think that'll affect not only the broadcast of the game, but the impact that it might have on player performances?
Yeah, just as long as we play, I guess, is how I approach it initially. And then whatever takes place from that point on, I guess, would be deemed something we just kind of work around. I feel that if, for instance, there's no fans in the stands at all, then the broadcast, I think, from at home, Fox has been, Joe Buck came out, he was talking about it, and there's been some conversations at Fox about, you know, their ability to create an experience for the viewer at home to where they wouldn't necessarily realize there's nobody in the stands. I don't know what that might look like or feel like, but I do think that the networks would be able to find a solution that doesn't take away from the experience at home. But I think for those teams that are playing and the players, that obviously is a very unique situation and very different. It's one thing if you're going to the Meadowlands and playing at Giant Stadium and there's no fans in the stands. I mean, for those road teams, it's obviously not nearly as daunting. I know that and then there's the owner's perspective as to what does it look like if there are no fans in the stands from their perspective? Does it make having the season worthwhile? I mean, those are all economic decisions that the league has to make, the owners have to make. So it takes on kind of a life of its own. But I from our perspective, and I think for most fans, they're just hopeful that there's football, and if there is, they're pretty happy about it.
Troy, you had to learn a new style of offense when Chan Gailey came in. How difficult do you think it'll be for Dak to go from this Jason Garrett offense to Mike McCarthy's West Coast offense? We've heard it might be a hybrid. We know Mike McCarthy's going to put his offense in, though. That doesn't, it's not going to be some kind of total hybrid. Especially given the contract situation. He can't, I know we don't think these virtual meetings mean a whole lot, but it would probably be helpful if McCarthy was able to talk to Dak right now, and that's not happening. How do you see that playing out, and how difficult will that be for both McCarthy and Dak?
I do think that there's continuity for Dak because of the fact Kellen Moore's back as the offensive coordinator, and if my memory serves me correctly, when McCarthy took the job, which came as a bit of a surprise for me, is that one, that he retained Kellen Moore. I know Mike is extremely involved in it's his offense, and it's an area of expertise that I think he's very good at. But I think that there were some good things that came obviously with keeping Kellen Moore. He's a guy who Dak has a good relationship with. He served as his backup his rookie year. He moved into coaching. Dak was a strong proponent of his to take over as the offensive coordinator last year. He put up good numbers. The offense moved the football. So there's a lot of things for Dak to like, and there's no doubt, like you said, that Mike's going to come in. He's going to put in some different concepts. But if the terminology is pretty much the same, then that's a less daunting offseason for not only Dak Prescott, but for the entire group, for those that were a part of this team last year, over the last couple of years. So I think that's very helpful. But with all that being said, yeah, I think that, being there in person, being in the meeting room, being able to communicate much more freely than you can, when everybody's stepping on each other on these Zoom calls, it's just not the same. It's not the same for coaches to know what players are really paying attention. Are you connecting with them? Are they diving into the playbook? All those things. So when you do have a new play caller or a new, I guess Kellen's going to be calling most of the plays, but when you have someone coming in who's going to influence that side of the ball, there will inevitably be some changes, and being there in person is obviously better. But that's why I think, going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, I think for those teams that have more continuity with less change, I think they're going to have an advantage early in the season this year.
You probably covered the Packers maybe more than any other team as a broadcaster, and that involves production meetings with head coaches and players. What are your impressions of Mike McCarthy as a head coach, and what do you think he's going to provide the Cowboys that they've lacked?
Well, I go back with Mike when he first got the job, and then when he was coaching a Hall of Famer and Brett Favre. Brett put up, pretty good numbers there under Mike McCarthy, and they had no real running game to speak of prior to Mike arriving. They changed some of the things that they were doing with Brett in that offense. They ran the ball a little bit better in the early years of Mike when he was calling the plays, and then I've obviously seen him when he started coaching a young Aaron Rodgers and bringing him along as a starter for that team, and so I've had a chance to talk of all the coaches around the league, outside of Jason Garrett being with the Cowboys and a guy who was my backup. I had as good a relationship with Mike McCarthy as any other coach in the NFL, and so I had a chance to have some really good conversations with him about offensive philosophy and things of that nature. And I think he has a real game plan in terms of how he wants to bring along quarterbacks. He really prides himself, having worked with Paul Hackett, Joe Montana when Joe went to Kansas City, been around some other really good quarterbacks, and kind of the belief in what's important to that position, how you play that position. Everything kind of works its way around that guy. Nobody understands that better than Mike McCarthy does. So I think he's going to be a really great fit for Dak. these players will realize, not that they do. I mean, Jason's as methodical and thorough a guy as I know. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of change in that regard. But Mike's the same way. I think the messaging clearly will be different. I have great respect, as you know, for Jason Garrett. And I think in a lot of ways he did a heck of a job here in Dallas, although ultimately, of course, you're measured on what you do in the postseason. But I do think that a fresh voice, both here in Dallas with Mike McCarthy and even in New York on the offensive side of the ball with Jason Garrett stepping in there. I think those ultimately are good things. 10 years is a long time to be in one place. Hasn't seemed to impact the guy in New England, but in a lot of other places, sometimes a change is good for everyone.
You mentioned Jason, who was the head coach for almost an entire decade. You advocated for him to be the head coach here, took him to spend a weekend with Jimmy Johnson to learn and gain some insights from him on how to do the job properly. How do you assess his 10 years, and where do you think it went wrong?
Well, I don't know that where it probably went wrong, I guess, if that's the way of putting it, would be last offseason when there was no extension done. I believe that Jerry wanted to re-sign him and had every intention of doing that. I think there was some public backlash, and so he held off with the belief that 2019 would be a great year for them, and the contract would pretty much take care of itself, as it had 4 or 5 years earlier. I think last year's season came as big of a surprise to me as anyone else. Nobody saw that coming. I thought they were going to have a really great football team. So that was the big disappointment, I think, in all of it. But overall, I think Jason came in. He did a great job, I believe, with the culture of that team and the type of players that he was wanting. He brought a philosophy that was one that I was very familiar with. The things that Jason believed as an offensive guy are very consistent with what I believe, because he and I's experiences were shared together under Norv Turner and Ernie Zampese. And, he got a lot of what he believes from those two guys and the success that we had there in the early 90s. I think he was able to implement that. We've seen it with their ability to run the football. That's where this team was certainly headed, building around the offensive line. But and the other area that he probably won't get enough credit for, but he should, is the type of players they were wanting. I think the locker room, when you view the players in that locker room now from when he first took over, I think you'll see a real shift in the type of players they were trying to draft and what they looked for in players when they brought them in to be Dallas Cowboys. I think all of those things were good things, and there's a lot of good things in place right now. I know Mike McCarthy came out and said this is the most experienced team that he's ever had to start a season. Guys who have been in the trenches, have played in have played a fair amount, and I think all that's a credit to Jason Garrett and the job that they were able to do. It's a talented team. I've said that for the last couple of years. I think it becomes debatable when they go 8-8, but I like overall what he did. But again, I think that all coaches, quarterbacks, certainly when you evaluate were they successful or were they not, those things tend to be identified in January, and that's where Jason just wasn't able to translate and have enough success in that month.
If Dak Prescott, Troy, were allowed to play on the franchise tag, I think you're on the record thinking maybe, too much is being made. Maybe this vacuum we're trying to fill with information about, oh, gosh, is he going to hold out what's going on? But if they couldn't get something done by July 15th, you saw Cousins do it. Cousins apparently told him at one point, don't be afraid of the franchise tag. Could that potentially get tricky and strange, knowing the Cowboys' history with not letting that happen with quarterbacks, especially of your stature?
I think that the franchise tag, if you consider, it's a lot of money. So I don't, the one thing about it, when you start talking about it publicly, there's a lot of people out there that are hearing those stories and reading those articles that don't have a lot of sympathy for a player who's going to make, $30-something million playing under a franchise tag. But I understand it. All players want the security of a long-term deal in case they were to get injured. It worked out for Kirk Cousins, and he played well, and he was able to remain healthy, and then he was able to get his guaranteed contract and make even more money. So the thing that has been interesting to me is how much attention there's been paid. Maybe it's because of this time there's just no other sports, there's nothing else to talk about, but it's not like Dak is not going to be playing for the Cowboys in 2020. He's whether it's through the franchise tag or if he is able to agree to a long-term deal, he's going to be playing. And then if it's franchise tag, they'll readdress it a year from now. But I know, knowing Jerry the way that I do, they want to get a deal done. Certainly it benefits them in other ways with the salary cap and being able to massage that. And for a team and an owner who's really all in right now, it gives them some ability to maneuver and bring in some other guys and make other decisions. But there's no question that Dak wants to get a deal done, and so that's really why I believe that ultimately something will happen between now and the deadline. But if not, okay, well he'll play as the franchise guy, and it'll be business as usual. So I'm not too worried about that. But to go back further with your question, I think that there's been. I've said many times, I'm a big fan of Dak's, and I just admire the way he handles himself. I know what's important to him. He's a very unselfish player. His teammates love playing for him, and he's a good player on top of all that. He came in as a guy who was regarded as a bit of a project, had not taken snaps even from underneath center. Play action was a big part of this offense, and there's been times when they've had to rely on him probably a little bit more than what they would prefer earlier in his career when he was such a young player. And yet, he was able to make the plays, and he's been a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways. And I've really enjoyed following his career so far. And I just think he's going to continue to get better. It's important to him. And with all that being said, I don't know if he's within the organization. I don't know if he's gotten as much credit as he deserves or as much respect as he deserves. His rookie year, he led him to 13 wins, and there was conversations from the owner about what a great story it'd be if Romo came off the bench and led him to a Super Bowl. And I think there were,
because he's done that so many times.
I think there were comments like that have taken away. I mean, this guy, he was a rookie at the time. He had played phenomenal. And I think there's comments like that it's only human nature. You begin to question, okay, well, just how respected am I? How much do they truly appreciate what I've done? And then when you're going through contract negotiations, no matter who you are, they're always a little bit contentious. And so I guess if there is not a long-term deal done, even though from what I gather, and again, it's just reports and I don't know what's accurate and what's not, there's been a lot of money that's been offered, so it hasn't been like they've not made some pretty substantial offers to him. But if they can't come to an agreement, I knowing Dak, he's going to go about his business the way he always does. But I would think that maybe deep down there might be those feelings that maybe he's not appreciated or respected as much as he'd like. I don't know.
This is the first time in team history they've had to franchise tag their quarterback. What do you think are the unique factors that created this situation between the Cowboys and Dak?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe the fact that he was a 4th round pick had something to do with it. I think there's a tendency sometimes it's hard. It's hard for guys drafted in later rounds sometimes to earn the respect of people around them, although I don't think that's appropriate in this particular situation because of him coming in and playing right away and being able to do what he's been able to do. I think he is one of those guys now, you look at him far differently than you normally would because he's proven it, and not just by 1 year. I think Kirk Cousins had to kind of overcome that. Is this a guy that we can win a world championship with? And when you're talking about the kind of money that they're talking about with Dak, that pretty much is the only question to ask. And if you believe that he is, then obviously you sign him and you pay whatever's necessary. And if you don't, then you're kind of looking other possibilities. But I'm not sure. We're in a different time. The money's gotten to be really extraordinary with the TV money going up the way that it has. And I still believe that we're having conversations about something that I don't necessarily believe is going to happen. And if we get into August and he's playing under the franchise tag, then I think that's a different conversation.
Troy, did you ever negotiate face-to-face with Jerry, or did you leave that completely up to your agent?
We had some conversations. It was my negotiations were a bit interesting. As you know, I came in the same year as Jerry, so the first contract that he had ever negotiated was mine. I was signed before the draft, a couple days before, and Lee Steinberg was my agent, and then Jeff Morad, who went on to actually become an owner in Major League Baseball, but he was a coworker with Lee, and then Jerry Jones had brought in Mike McCoy, who had been in the oil and gas business with Jerry, and he was in Dallas working for the Cowboys, and he was also involved with the negotiation. So it's kind of interesting. What would happen is Jerry and Lee would get in a room, and they would invariably, they'd come to blows. I mean, it would just get so heated that they'd have to take a break. It's just too much is being said. It's not good. It's not healthy. And then Morad and Mike McCoy, they're calmer heads. They'd step in, and then they'd negotiate it a little bit further. And then once they came to an impasse, then they'd put Jerry and Lee back in the room and see if they'd go back at it. And so it's kind of one of those good cop, bad cop things going on. And the stories, that I would hear, before Jerry had ever coached or had ever owned the team for one game. We had not even. I was just in the middle of my first negotiation, so it was early on. And Jerry, even then, something that we've heard from him for the last 25 years, he was saying to me and Lee Steinberg that I should play for half for the opportunity to play for the Dallas Cowboys, and how much that meant wearing the star. And you wanted to say, this is the worst team in football. Are you kidding me? And there were there were only 30,000 people coming to games. The stadium was not full when I first got to Dallas. But it's a real credit to Jerry, actually, that even then, as someone who had just bought the team, he had a healthy appreciation for what the Dallas Cowboys meant. And then it didn't have near the cachet at that time because of all those years of struggle that it has now. But yet he remained pretty consistent. But yeah, so I'd then get in the room with Jerry from time to time, and he's the best I've ever been around at negotiating. And whenever he's negotiating something or pitching something, selling something, my money is always on him. And so even though I was on the other side of the table as a player, I thought I had good deals. I'm not so sure now that I look back on it, because he's awfully good at that part of it, and he's meant a lot, obviously, to the organization and to the brand. If
he didn't have to franchise tag you, clearly you didn't push him hard enough. I think that's the lesson to be learned here.
Yeah, I think I never held out either. So I think you're right. I think I probably left a fair amount of money on the table. No telling where he might have gone.
You mentioned your agent at the time, Lee Steinberg, who is also the agent for Patrick Mahomes. And apparently those negotiations between Mahomes and the Chiefs are now underway. And obviously those could affect the Dak Prescott, price tag and what the outcome is with the Cowboys. How do you see that being a factor in the Cowboys negotiations?
My guess is that they're waiting and hoping that something happens with Dak, and then they'll use that then as the benchmark for Mahomes. And clearly, a guy who's won the league MVP, he's won a Super Bowl on his rookie contract. His first couple of years as being the full-time starter, he deserves it and will be the highest paid guy in our game. So I don't think as far as Pat Mahomes, how that might impact Dak Prescott's contract. I think it's the other way around. I don't see Mahomes' contract having a huge bearing on anything that might happen with Dak if he's not signed to a long-term deal by then.
The other guy you mentioned in that conversation was Jerry, who's always been an interesting character. And obviously you've expressed some concerns about the unique way this franchise typically operates. Do you think Mike McCarthy's experience and the respect that Jerry seems to have for him as a guy who's comes in here having won a Super Bowl is enough to overcome some of those issues?
Well, I don't know. On the one hand, I'd say probably not. I think things have been done here a certain way. How much change, can you truly expect? I'm not so sure. I think, however, Mike McCarthy, he's been in a unique situation in Green Bay to where there's not an owner, and so
right.
He's had some real autonomy over the years there. Obviously, much different here. I don't know. I don't know how much Mike has talked to others. I don't know if he spoke to Jason Garrett or other people who have been part of this organization in maybe what he can expect, but. I think there's a healthy appreciation for McCarthy. There's a mutual respect between the two of them, Jerry Jones and McCarthy. And I believe that they'll work well together. I said at the time when Mike was being interviewed, I wasn't sure it would be a great fit for either party. I wasn't sure if Jerry would get comfortable enough with Mike. To my knowledge, there was no real history between those two guys. And then would Mike view it as a fit? There were other opportunities for Mike probably as a head coach. But this is the Dallas Cowboys. It's a very unique situation. As we talked about, they're a really talented team. I think if you're going to play, this is how I always felt. If you're going to play in the NFL, you want to play for an organization where it's really important. And it's really important in Dallas. And there's others as well. But not all the teams are like that. And I think that if you're going to coach, you kind of believe the same thing. And so I was happy to see it work out for those two. I felt it was the best hire the Cowboys could have made. And I think that along with that, for a guy in his resume who's won a Super Bowl, my guess is that there's probably going to be some concessions on Jerry's part that maybe there weren't in the past. I don't know that to be true, but my guess is that they're probably – not that they're in writing or anything like that, but my guess is there is. I mean, I think that Jerry is in a position where he desperately wants to win another Super Bowl. This is a guy who has done it, and he has a blueprint of his own. And I think that he'll, for the most part, be allowed to follow that blueprint.
You mentioned the expectations there existed for this team last year and how they failed going 8-8 in a weak division where 8-8 against the right teams would have won the division, sent them to the playoffs. Instead results in a coaching change. One of the stats that really stands out to me as you try to assess the quality of this team and what went wrong, they were 1-6 against teams with winning records. What does that say to you about, what are the proper expectations for this team going into this season? Again, we think they have great talent, but they haven't always succeeded with great talent.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's why they're 8-8. You're not a good football team if you can't beat good teams. It's real simple, and so all of that has to change. And I think that even though the players, even though there's a lot of players that are the same, I think a new head coach, messaging being a little bit different, can players feel differently about themselves and their ability to go in and play well in some of those games. I think that's the important thing. How do you get over the hump? And that's the challenge for Mike McCarthy and this staff. I think it's a team because of Jerry's visibility as an owner and the Cowboys' popularity. There is a belief or a feeling that this team has probably accomplished a lot more than it really has, and it's understandable why some teams around the NFL who have done more in recent years but aren't regarded the same. They don't lead off the various sports shows like the Cowboys do. There's some animosity that comes with that, but this is a team that really needs to go prove it out there on the field, and they're talented enough. As I said earlier, comparing the Cowboys with the other teams that we cover across the league, and I saw virtually all of them doing the Thursday night package as well as the Sunday package for Fox. The Cowboys are as talented as any team in the NFL. There's very few coaches, I believe, that wouldn't have swapped teams with the Cowboys because of how talented they are. So now they just got to live up to that, and it's hard. It's we talked about this quarantine, not being able to get back to work. That doesn't help matters for sure.
Specifically regarding that talent at wide receiver, you told us one time that third wide receiver is extremely important in your mind, and you valued it so much. The potential of this receiving core, Amari, CeeDee Lamb coming in here, and Gallup, where do you think this thing could go, and what are reasonable expectations for a rookie wide receiver in this current NFL?
Yeah, you're right. I've always felt your receiving core is only as good as your third receiver because defenses can do things. They definitely can do things against a number one guy, although, you look around at some of these top receivers, the Michael Thomases, the Julio Jones of the world, and even the Michael Irvins and Jerry Rices from years past. And everyone knows you're trying to get them the ball, and yet they continually come up with ways to get them the ball. So which is a credit to those play callers and those players as well. But I think the third guy, particularly the inside third guy, the slot receiver, more today than even back when I was playing, is critical. Maybe even now you got to go to the fourth receiver because you saw very little, not as much anyway, on early downs of the three wide receiver sets like you see almost predominantly in today's game. But CeeDee Lamb, obviously a great pick to fall to where he fell, a guy who virtually everyone felt that he was a top 10 talent, best receiver by a lot of people's boards in the NFL. The position, from my experience at wide receiver, quarterback, to me is the toughest position to step in and play right away as a rookie. I think the next toughest is wide receiver. These guys do not face at the college level the skill of the corners in the NFL, and not just their ability to run and do those types of things, but they're stronger. I mean, they're older. They've been in the weight room. They've been in a program. So the strength of those guys. A lot of these receivers struggle getting off the line of scrimmage. The inside slot receiver is an important position because he has to be smart enough to know what is happening around him. The inside guy can totally screw up an entire play if he gets too much depth. He doesn't get the landmarks where he's supposed to get within the route to help clear some things up. So he'll be a real key. But it sounds like I don't know him, but having watched him play and then hearing from a lot of different people, this guy's a real gym rat, smart guy. So I believe that he'll be able to step in. He's got some explosiveness, of course. I believe he'll step in and have a solid rookie year. And I like Michael Gallup. I liked him. What I saw him early in his rookie year, and felt that he was going to have a great year last year, and he did. And he's going to continue to get better. And then, of course, with Amari Cooper, it's a good group. And the one area where they haven't really taken advantage yet is Ezekiel Elliott and his ability. Now, they got Pollard, and Pollard brings a little bit of that. So, I mean, he's obviously a weapon. But with Ezekiel Elliott, he's able to do some things in the passing game that they haven't utilized yet. I would expect to maybe see him a little bit more involved with things within the passing game designed specifically for him. But yeah, there's a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. A good offensive line. It's a quarterback's dream. I know Dak is sure excited about the group that he has, and just right now the question is at center with Travis Frederick retiring, but that'll get addressed. But I like this group. They should have another great year offensively. They should be as explosive as anybody in the game.
It was more, I think, on the defensive side and on special teams that they really failed for the most part last year. And one guy I want to ask you about is Aldon Smith, who was one of the great young pass rushers in football when he played with the 49ers. He's obviously been out for 4 years now with a variety of substance abuse issues, personal conduct policy issues. So he hasn't played in 4 years. He's going to turn 31 years old. Obviously, the Cowboys have lost Robert Quinn, so they need a pass rusher, whether it's Aldon Smith or it's Randy Gregory. who was suspended all of last season. But I just wanted your perspective. You must have covered a lot of games where Aldon Smith was a dominant player early in his career with the 49ers going to the Super Bowl. How difficult is this going to be for him to come back and be an elite player after so much time away?
I would think it'll be a monumental challenge for him. You know, I mean, you miss that much football, and he was a really good player back when he first came into the league, had a real impact for those teams. But to be out of the game as long as he has, to think that you just step in and pick up where you left off, I don't know that necessarily happens. And, you know, the theme, of course, has been the quarantine and no real off season. And so he hasn't had a chance to really work on his craft the way that he would under a normal off season. So whatever time he has, when they do get back together prior to the year, you know, he's going to have to fast track that and see how comfortable he could get. I could see where maybe early in the season he struggles and then he gets more and more acclimated to the speed of the game. It's hard to replicate those things on the practice field. It just reminds me of a comment that Bill Parcells once said. He says, hey, at some point in the training camp, you know, when he first got the job in Dallas, he said, every player is going to have to prove to me that he can play at a high level. And I think that's true of Aldon Smith, you know, that nothing's handed to anybody. And he's got a lot of work ahead of him. I know that he's put in a lot of time. He's in a position where he feels like he's ready to contribute at a high level. The Cowboys, you know, were able to bring him in and without a lot of risk and see what he's able to do. I'm pulling for him. I hope that he's able to have a big impact. But I would think, without having been a pass rusher, I'm thinking about how it would be as a quarterback. It's a lot of years. I know when I'd missed 4 or 5 games, coming back was a bit of an adjustment. I can only imagine what he's having to go through.
You mentioned Bill Parcells, and unfortunately you never had a chance to play for him. That would have been a great partnership, I think. But you did play for one of the most accomplished coaches in franchise history, Jimmy Johnson, and he's going into the Hall of Fame, assuming there is a ceremony in Canton in, less than 70 days at this point. He's not in the Ring of Honor, but he is going in the Hall of Fame, and apparently he'll do that first. He chose you as his presenter. How unfathomable is that honor based on how you started your careers together with the Cowboys in 1989?
Well, I can't BS you because you were there for it all. You saw what happened. But early in my career, and you know what? It is hard for me to fathom how far we've come. And you know, I've known Jimmy since I was probably 14, 15 years old in Henrietta, Oklahoma. And Oklahoma State was recruiting a player on my team and another guy from a neighboring town. And so I got noticed because of that. And I was on Oklahoma State's radar back when I was a sophomore at 14 years old. And Oklahoma State is where I wanted to go. When Jimmy was the head coach, I went to his football camp before my senior year. We've known each other a long time. And when he came to Dallas as the head coach, I was really excited about it. I was looking forward to it. I was going to be playing for a guy who I was familiar with, who I'd known for a while. And then things, you know, combined with bringing in Steve Walsh, that didn't help with Jimmy and I's relationship because he then he took a step back and he just didn't want to really get involved in that room. So it hindered, I think, our development and our relationship. And then the fact that we struggled, that didn't help. So to go from periods where we weren't even really speaking to now, he could ask anybody on the planet to present him, and he asked me to do it. It's hard for me to even put into words that. It really is. And as big of an honor as it is to go into the Hall of Fame, and it's a huge honor. I know when I got told that, hey, you are going into the pro football, I mean, I was like, holy cow, this is unbelievable. But I think it's even a bigger honor for that individual who is asked to present the inductee. And I said this back when I was going in, you know, forget that I just got asked. I never imagined that I'd ever get asked to be an inductee. I mean, to be a presenter. And so it means a lot. And Jimmy, you know, they're doing it a little bit differently. He's doing it a little bit differently. Terry Bradshaw is going to present the gold jacket at the gold jacket ceremony, and then I'll be there, of course, if they have it on stage and going that route. But it means a lot, and there's no question that our time together at Fox, I think that had Jimmy have left after the night, and we were close at the end of his time with the Cowboys, but if he had gone off to Miami and then just retired, and I doubt that he and I would have maintained, much of a relationship. But since he went to Fox and I'm at Fox, I see him a lot. I travel just about annually to his place in the Keys, spend a few days with him. I really cherish that friendship with him, and I'm excited about it. I'm hopeful that they have the ceremony. I know how much it means to Jimmy. It's well-deserved, and I'm really looking forward to him being honored.
I think the point you make about the honor of being the presenter is a good one, because you designated Norv Turner as your presenter. It's sort of, this is somebody I would not be here without. And of all the players that Jimmy coached, and there were a lot of great ones, he chose you. And like you said, you started at a point very far from that. And I guess it makes the story that much better that you've come as far as you have.
Yeah, I think people look at it a little bit, everyone kind of approaches it, I think, somewhat differently. There's been some inductees who have had one of their kids induct them, be their presenter. There's others who have had their spouse be their presenter. It ranges the whole spectrum. For me, I really felt that I needed to ask someone to present me that was the most responsible for my success as a player. And as much as Jimmy had meant to our teams, I thought for me personally and my growth was attributed to when we were able to bring Norv Turner in, which says a lot for a guy who was only with me for 3 seasons, how much he impacted not just me really, but our entire offense. And I know Michael Irvin and Emmitt Smith feel the same way. So when people ask me, when it was announced that Jimmy was going in, I had some buddies of mine who reached out and said, "Hey, do you think that Jimmy will ask you to be his presenter?" And I said, "Oh, heavens, no." I said, "There's no way he asked you to be his presenter." I thought it'd be one of 4 people. I thought that either one of his sons would present him, his longtime attorney, Nick Christian, or Terry Bradshaw. I thought it'd be one of those 4 guys. And so I was checking in to the hotel where we were staying for the Super Bowl in Miami. And when I walked into the lobby, I'd just gotten out of the car, still had my luggage. I hadn't even gotten to the registration desk yet. And Jimmy was in the lobby, and he comes running up to me and he starts talking to me about it. First time I'd seen him, gave him a big hug. First time I'd seen him since it was announced there on national television that he was going into the Hall of Fame. And that's when he told me, he says, I really would like for you to present me. And I said, wow, Jimmy, I can't even get to tell you. I said, I will do anything you want, whatever you want. But I said, listen, if you wake up tomorrow and you change your mind and you want to go a different route, I said, it is fine. Trust me. I said, I'm just so happy for you. But whatever you want me to do, I'll do. And the next morning he came in and said, you're my guy. But I'm going to have Terry present the jacket, and blown away. I mean, just totally blown away, and I'm thrilled. And there's so many guys that the Norv Turner and Hudson Houck, and the list goes on and on, of Tony Wise. These guys these coaches that were a part of those teams, some longer than others, they are so excited for Jimmy. And the greatest moment I thought when they announced it on national television, when David Baker was in the Fox studios there at halftime of that game, Jimmy didn't know what was coming. And yet, if you remember, the first words out of his mouth was he wanted to thank the assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And I thought, what a moment. I mean, to be totally caught off guard. And the first thing that comes to mind is to thank the assistant coaches and then to thank the players. It wasn't about him. It was about those assistants who meant. I thought that was. I know in talking to a number of these assistant coaches, that meant more to them than you'll ever know. And I had planned a big party here in Dallas. It was scheduled for May 8th, a few weeks ago.
I haven't got my invitation yet on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
It was going to be just the Cowboys players and coaches from that era. But I told Jimmy, I said, hey, I'd really like to do this for you. There's a number of players and coaches that they'll be in Canton when you go in, but you're not going to have time for these guys. And I think for them to be able to come up, a lot of them, I mean, I'm fortunate that I see Jimmy all the time. A lot of these guys never had the opportunity to thank Jimmy for what he meant to them before he left the building and went on to Florida. So we were going to have a great celebration. And then like everything, it got canceled, but that was unfortunate. So I'm hopeful that we're able to at least get together and some of these guys will have a moment, albeit maybe a brief one, to let him know the impact that he had on them.
Troy, we really appreciate this. I did have to ask you, did you and Werder also get off to a rocky start? That has happened a little bit with Ed over the years.
Well, we did. I think it was primarily because he had a better mullet than I did back in the day. You know, I think that
there is a photo of us walking off the field after your first Super Bowl win where I think we're virtually indistinguishable, at least above the neck.
Well, hey, we were very distinguishable. I wouldn't say.
I said above the neck.
I don't think anybody had a hard time figuring out who was who. I will say this, that Ed was, Ed has always, he's been very consistent. He was every bit as tenacious back then as he is now. I mean, just relentless in his pursuit of a story. And so we tended to, and he had he kind of had a thing where he really liked some sensationalism from time to time. So we would get a little sideways every now and then because of his eagerness to make a name for himself.
One time, I can only recall one time where you were officially listed on the media report as pissed off at me. You remember what that was?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Okay, you want to tell it, or you want me to, or you want to leave it?
You can tell it whenever you're ready.
I'm going to tell it now so you can contradict me and make it right, because I'm just trying to get a sensational headline here. I believe it was when Emmett was absent from Cowboys training camp in Austin, and obviously that was a focal point of our coverage at the Dallas Morning News at the time. And I asked you a totally fair but impossible question for you to answer diplomatically, which was something to the effect of, how difficult will it be for this team to win if it doesn't have Emmett, right? And as a quarterback...
No, well, I wouldn't say that. No.
Can this team win without Emmett? Can this team win without Emmett?
Let's hear Troy's.
Okay. Well,
yes, the question was... the question was not how difficult will it be to win without Emmett. The question was, can you win without Emmett? Well, in all likelihood, we're going into the season without Emmett, which is what happened. We went the first 2 weeks. And so I'm answering the question, not wanting to hurt Emmett's negotiation, but also as the quarterback, I'm being asked, can we win without Emmett? Well, am I supposed to say, oh, hell no, there's no way we can win. Why are we even going to show up?
Well, that is what you should have said based on the results.
I said, Ed, you're asking me, can we win? And there's a difference between can we win and will we win? And can we win? We absolutely can win. Will we win? I don't know. And so we kind of went around this whole dance as far as, all right, how's the question being asked? Here's my response. Knowing that it was sensitive, I said, Ed, let's just be clear on what I'm saying here, okay? I don't want to wake up tomorrow and have a misrepresentation of what I'm saying. Oh, no, I got you. I understand totally. Well, the headlines, I wake up the next day, the headline said, Aikman says Cowboys can win without Emmett. And, yeah.
I wrote every word in the story.
I'm furious. All I ever hear from you writers is, hey, I don't write the headlines. Well, somebody better figure out who writes the headlines and get a hold of that guy, So the article itself actually was fine. The article was just as I had said, but but we all know this. I mean, even to this day, I mean, most people don't take the time to even read that much of the article. And if they do, they're so heavily influenced by what the headline says that they don't read it properly. And that was a hard one. I know it bothered Emmett too. And
I was going to just say, what was his reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't. I mean, I think that he's looking at it like, wow, I wouldn't have liked it if it was reversed. And so then I did what any good quarterback and teammate would do. We went out and lost 2 games and helped his negotiation. So.
Got him the contract he deserved.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to know that you only take issue with the headline. And trust me, I did have a long and serious discussion with the person who authored that and offended you. And I'm glad that you made it very clear that everything under my byline was exactly accurate. And I didn't, to be totally honest with you, I didn't at the time think of the impossible situation I was putting you in. But I recognize it now, obviously. But I really didn't at the time think that I was putting you in an impossible position. I just wanted to know the answer to my question. So
I feel like
it's almost like me being on this podcast. Nobody realizes the impossible position that I'm being put in right now.
Multiple times. Let's see if this winds up being the second time you're upset with me. Hey, thanks for doing this. We always love talking football with you. Let's hope we have some to watch and that we have some opportunities to talk before and after games on the sidelines as you and Joe Buck and Aaron Andrews get ready for your stellar telecasts. And again, if you decide you want to do a podcast on a more regular basis, just like when we talked about Emmett's contract, I'm here for you.
Hey, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm pretty confident we'll have football, and I know America wants it, and everybody involved in the game wants it, and looking forward to it. And it'll be here before we know it. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Troy. Take care.
Appreciate it, Troy.
All right, guys. You got it, guys. Uh-huh.
There he goes, the great Troy Aikman, the Hall of Famer, back on Doomsday. And the great thing is, Ed, we actually have a cartoon of him drawn by the brilliant Chris Morris. So if we can find that,
which we did, we used to do those every week when we put those. So before Chris Morris got writer's cramp, I think.
I know, we came out strong. We had a bunch right out of the chute.
This is when you really cared.
The pandemic. No, I do. I don't think I had I think I had a brief time without a daily radio show.
I know. I had a long time without a daily anything.
This was your primary focus for a little while. But that was great. And I don't want to go too much longer here because we did almost an hour. Was that right, Frito, with Troy? I did like it at the end. I was just kind of messing with him, but it almost felt like a little therapy session. Y'all were able to kind of go revisit it. And
look, I take great pride in the fact that I covered that team all those years, and Troy, the quarterback, can remember exactly one time when he was really mad at me. Now, there might have been other times that he was a little upset, irritated, that he didn't mention, but this was the one time that he let me know he was not pleased. And I can understand why, but I'm being honest when I say at the time I didn't see anything wrong with the question, but obviously I had a great story no matter what he was going to say, right?
Yeah, in the headlines, we've all been hit by it. Sometimes they'll put some aggressive...
Damn headline writers.
Yes. Steve, I tell you what, Ed, as we react just a little bit to what we just talked about, I thought Troy gave us some really, really good stuff, and we went an hour with him, and I think it's great that he has a really good feel for Mike McCarthy. I think it's interesting that he sort of had that belief that he didn't know if it'd be a really good fit either way. And I don't think he's completely changed his opinion, but, of course, he'll just now move forward and see how all this works out. But I think it's interesting. And then I also loved, I was kind of joking with him a little bit, but we kind of wanted to know what some of his negotiations were, but got into some fun stories with Lee Steinberg and Jerry, and some of these same characters who Lee's probably in his mid to late 60s now. Jerry's obviously in his late 70s. All those characters are still doing their thing, still age, but it's fascinating to go back, what was that, 25, 30, that's 35 years ago, and to how all that was playing out. So I just thought that was a lot of fun because it was historical, but also some really interesting stuff on the receivers. Dak, thought he had a lot of interesting things to say about Dak Prescott. Even after all that, he said, I don't think this is a story. But he did finally kind of get back around, Ed, to saying if it
doesn't get done,
yeah.
if it doesn't get done by the deadline, then I may have a different opinion on the long-term viability of the situation. And yeah, I mean, he's obviously, Troy's a historic figure in the history of the Cowboys because he's won 3 Super Bowls and was he's a historic figure in that regard. And yet because of his current capacity covering the NFL like he does as the #1 football analyst on Fox, he still has great relevance to everything that's happening with the franchise now and in the league, at the moment. So he has great, and he's willing to give his opinion. To me, that's the greatest thing. He's willing to give his honest opinion. I think he did throughout that interview. That's the thing I appreciate the most about him, and it's not common among quarterbacks who have accomplished what he has to be honest in their evaluation of things. And he doesn't really, when he criticizes someone, I think it's generally done fairly.
All right, we have Romo booked next week.
Except me.
Oh, okay.
I think you got out of hand with the criticism of me. We have Romo next week. Oh, good.
I was gonna. Yeah,
glad you finally delivered that.
No,
it's been 3 years.
We got a way better shot at Roger. I think we ought to just do Roger. I think Tony might do it. Tony got word that I was working on some project, and he kind of shut it down on me. But that's okay. I've ended that project.
So he's afraid of what you might report about him?
No. I don't think so. I mean, he shouldn't be. I've got very kind things to say about Tony. This has been a lot of fun. Ed, I did want to get your reaction. We haven't done one in a while, and you went to Colorado, and I was trying to let you be. Oh, make that announcement, by the way. Your new granddaughter.
Yeah, Henry is little Henry.
Yeah,
is a big brother now.
It's pretty awesome.
His parents successfully delivered yet another young member to society named Delilah. And so one of the great things that we got to see her right after the draft. We made it a quasi-illegal border crossing into Colorado and spent some time seeing her. And one of the great things is to watch Henry sing the Plain White Tees song, Hey There, Delilah.
Oh, that's nice.
He sings that to her, and sometimes she stops crying when he does, and even when she continues to fuss, he perseveres and delivers his performance nonetheless.
I love it. Frito, you'll love this story. Ed, in my mind, I thought I think he was going to be there maybe in Colorado for 10 days and getting to bond with the new granddaughter. And I just kind of thought, I'm going to really try to leave Ed alone and let Ed do his thing and let him do his grandfather thing. And I think about day 9, Frito, I think I was live on the air doing the radio show when I received a text from Ed basically like, why the hell have we not done another podcast?
It was after the draft. I thought we did one after the first round.
I know, but I mean, I literally in my mind thought, he just needs some time. This would be great, and just whatever. So anyway,
try to give the people what they're asking for.
I like it. I like your passion. I always have, and that's one of the things I really try to tap into. You've never had trouble tapping into your own passion, anger. Whatever you want to call it.
My emotions.
But we did, I want to get your take on one thing. What did you think about that day 3 pick, Reggie Robinson from Tulsa?
The corner?
Yeah, that's right. I just want to start asking you about day 3 picks. What about that Tyler Biadasz? Did you like him?
I could have gone pick by pick if you wanted to. I've got a whole file here on what people say. You want to hear what I have on Reggie Robinson?
Please, I was kind of joking, but let me know what you have on Reggie Robinson. I would like to hear it.
Reggie Robinson.
Yeah. Is he a cornerback?
He is a cornerback from Tulsa.
Okay.
And not everybody completely sold on him. He is a kick blocker. He's obviously a very aggressive type of player. He can, get up on the line of scrimmage. Had 4 interceptions in his college career. All came during his senior season. So I think it's a leap. I'm not sure he was that high on everybody's draft board. But the guy I want to talk about the next time we do a podcast, whether it's right before training camp or if there's a mini camp involved,
December.
I would like to talk about Trayvon Diggs, their 2nd round pick.
Oh, I'd like that.
The player that they chose after CeeDee Lamb got to them.
Because I'm hearing mixed
obviously
reviews.
Touted that he was a steal getting him where they did, and there are a lot of people in the league who have some misgivings about.
Whoa. Trevon Diggs. All right,
we just got a notification, by the way, as we're sitting here, that the Cowboys are making Aldon Smith available on a conference call today.
They somehow, by the way, they let you in on those. You know what they tell me? They're like, well, we don't out-of-town media. I do my show in Central Texas from here, but apparently, yes. Well, why don't you monitor that,
okay,
Ed,
I will.
and see, because we're supposed to get him one-on-one because we have that relationship with the agent. So anyway, let's continue, but that'll be good.
Okay.
Would you mind eavesdropping on that deal?
I'll take care of it.
It is the Doomsday Podcast. Ed Werder, Matt Mosley, and Frito Nation Productions. Very, very exciting stuff. You'll have it soon, and a great day to visit with Troy Aikman. And you can always download this on your iPhone. We're available on Android, all the different platforms. We appreciate it. We will be back with you soon. It is Doomsday. Say goodnight, Ed.
Good night, Ed.